Welcome to Truth Behind History, where we uncover the hidden forces that shape civilizations.
Today, we're diving deep into the 1973 oil crisis, a pivotal moment in modern history that reshaped economies, redefined global politics, and left an impact that still lingers today. Buckle up, because this is more than just an oil shortage. This is a story of war, economic shockwaves, and long lines at the gas pump. So, what exactly went down in 1973? Well, picture this. The world was running on cheap oil, economies were booming, and then, bam, suddenly, a massive energy shock. It all started with the Yom Kippur War. In October 1973, a coalition of Arab nations, led by Egypt and Syria, launched a surprise attack on Israel. The US and its allies quickly stepped in to support Israel. In response, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, dominated by Arab oil producers, decided to fight back, not with weapons, but with oil. They placed an embargo on the United States and other supporting nations, cutting off a crucial supply of crude oil. And the results? Oil prices didn't just rise, they quadrupled. In just a few months, the cost of crude oil soared from $3 per barrel to nearly $12. For consumers, this meant gas prices skyrocketed, leading to fuel shortages, rationing, and mile-long lines at gas stations. But this wasn't just about the price of a gallon of gas. This triggered global economic turmoil. Inflation soared, unemployment spiked, and a prolonged recession gripped the world. Governments and businesses alike scrambled to deal with the crisis, and the effects would ripple for years to come. Now, to really understand the 1973 oil crisis, we need to talk about the power players behind it, OPEC. So, what is OPEC? Think of it as the oil world's version of an exclusive club, a cartel made up of some of the world's biggest oil-producing nations. It was founded in 1960 by countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq, with the goal of controlling oil production and pricing. Before OPEC, Western oil companies largely dictated the price of oil. But OPEC flipped the script, giving oil-rich nations the ability to coordinate production levels and influence global markets. And influence they did. In 1973, OPEC demonstrated just how much power it had by orchestrating the embargo, forcing oil-dependent countries to scramble for alternatives. This was a wake-up call to the world. Energy wasn't just an economic issue, it was a geopolitical weapon. The embargo made one thing crystal clear: any country that relied too much on foreign oil was vulnerable. OPEC wasn't just a trade organization, it had the ability to shape global politics and economies with the flick of a production switch. If you think the 1973 oil crisis was a one-time event, think again. This was just the beginning of a long history of oil shocks that sent the world economy on a rollercoaster ride. 1973, the OPEC embargo sent oil prices skyrocketing, quadrupling in a matter of months. 1979, the Iranian Revolution. Just 6 years later, Iran, one of the world's top oil producers, fell into political chaos as the Shah was overthrown. This caused oil production to collapse, sending prices doubling again and leading to fuel shortages worldwide. 2008, the financial crisis. Fast forward a few decades, and we see another extreme price spike. In the lead-up to the 2008 recession, oil prices peaked at $147 per barrel, driven by speculation, high demand, and market instability. But when the financial crisis hit, demand collapsed, and prices came crashing down. And then there's the most recent one, the 2022 energy crisis, caused by the Russia-Ukraine war. Sanctions on Russia, one of the world's top oil and gas exporters, led to soaring global energy prices, further fueling inflation and economic instability worldwide. See the pattern? Oil crises don't just affect gas prices, they shape entire economies, international relations, and even wars. The 1973 oil embargo wasn't just an economic inconvenience, it completely changed daily life for millions of people. Gas shortages and rationing. If you were alive during the crisis, you probably remember this: endless lines at gas stations, stations running out of fuel, and the US government rationing gas based on license plate numbers. Odd-numbered plates could fill up on certain days, evens on others. This wasn't just happening in the US, Europe also faced severe shortages. Recession and stagflation. The oil price spike caused something economists feared: stagflation, a toxic mix of high inflation and stagnant economic growth. Unemployment rose, the cost of living soared, and businesses struggled to keep up. Energy conservation policies. In response, governments got serious about energy efficiency. The US introduced fuel economy standards for cars, and speed limits were lowered to conserve gas. Meanwhile, countries started investing in alternative energy sources, realizing they couldn't afford to rely on OPEC forever. This was a turning point. The world had to rethink how it used energy and where it got it from. The 1973 crisis didn't just change how people thought about oil, it forced a global shift toward alternative energy sources. Governments realized that relying too much on foreign oil was a massive risk, so they started looking for ways to diversify their energy supplies. Nuclear power expansion. One of the biggest responses was a surge in nuclear energy investment. Countries like France, Japan, and the US poured money into nuclear power as a way to generate electricity without needing oil. France, for example, became a world leader in nuclear energy, reducing its dependence on fossil fuels significantly. Rise of renewable energy. This was also the moment when governments and scientists began seriously investing in renewables. Wind, solar, and hydroelectric power were seen as long-term solutions to reduce reliance on oil. While these energy sources weren't major players yet, the foundation for the future of clean energy was being laid. Energy efficiency innovations. This crisis pushed industries to innovate. The auto industry, for instance, started making cars that were more fuel efficient, leading to the rise of compact and hybrid vehicles. Governments also introduced home insulation policies to reduce energy consumption in heating and cooling. So while the crisis was painful, it kickstarted a major transition, one that would shape energy policy for decades to come. The economic impact of the 1973 oil crisis, and later oil shocks, was massive. These weren't just momentary spikes in gas prices, they caused long-lasting damage to global economies. Stagflation, a nightmare for economists. Normally, inflation and unemployment don't rise together, but during oil shocks, they did. Higher oil prices increased the cost of everything, transportation, goods, and services, while economic growth stalled, creating a vicious cycle of stagnation and inflation. Global recession. Industries that relied heavily on oil, like transportation and manufacturing, took a huge hit. Airlines, car manufacturers, and shipping companies faced downturns, leading to job losses and economic slowdowns. Debt and financial instability. Developing nations, which relied on oil imports, were hit even harder. Many were already struggling with debt, and when oil became more expensive, their financial situations worsened. Countries had to take on more loans, leading to prolonged economic instability. Essentially, oil wasn't just a commodity, it was the lifeblood of the global economy, and any shock to its supply sent shockwaves through every industry. Now, let's fast forward to today. The Russia-Ukraine war has been a modern reminder of just how fragile energy markets are and how geopolitical events can still disrupt oil and gas supplies. Gas supply disruptions. Russia, one of the largest exporters of natural gas, cut off supplies to Europe in response to Western sanctions. This sent European nations scrambling for alternative energy sources, just like in 1973. Surging energy prices. Oil and gas prices spiked globally, fueling inflation in multiple countries. Everything from heating bills to food prices increased because of the rising cost of transportation and production. Renewable energy acceleration. But just like in the 1970s, this crisis also pushed countries to double down on renewable energy. Many European nations ramped up investments in wind, solar, and energy storage to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels and avoid future energy shocks. History, it seems, has a way of repeating itself. The lessons learned in 1973 are just as relevant today. So, where does all of this leave us today? The 1973 oil crisis and subsequent energy shocks have pushed the world toward a future where fossil fuels are no longer king. The transition to green energy is now a global priority. Growth of renewable energy, wind, solar, and hydroelectric power have gone from fringe solutions to dominant energy sources in many parts of the world. Countries are investing billions into these technologies, aiming to reduce their dependence on fossil fuels. Decline of fossil fuels. Many nations are phasing out coal and oil in favor of cleaner energy alternatives. Governments are setting ambitious goals to reduce carbon emissions and transition to a more sustainable energy grid. Energy storage innovations. One of the biggest challenges with renewables has been reliability. What happens when the sun isn't shining or the wind isn't blowing? Advances in battery technology are making it possible to store large amounts of renewable energy, making clean energy a more stable and dependable option. This shift isn't happening overnight, but the trend is clear. The future of energy is moving away from oil, and the lessons from past crises are driving this transformation. But transitioning to green energy isn't just about reducing emissions, it's also about energy security and resilience. The world has seen firsthand how dangerous it is to rely too heavily on a single energy source or supplier. Diversification of energy sources. Nations are working to reduce reliance on any one country or fuel source, making energy supplies more secure. Investment in clean technologies. Governments and corporations are funding massive clean energy projects, from wind farms to hydrogen power, ensuring a more stable future. Resilience against future shocks. Energy policies are being designed to withstand geopolitical and economic disruptions, so future crises won't hit as hard as the oil shocks of the past. The goal? A world where energy isn't just clean, but also stable, secure, and affordable. So, what have we learned from decades of oil crises and energy shocks? The key takeaways are clear. Energy independence is crucial. Countries that rely too heavily on foreign oil put their economies at risk. Diversification is key to stability. Policy adaptation is key. Governments must plan ahead and develop proactive energy strategies to avoid sudden crises. Sustainability is the future. Investing in renewables and clean energy isn't just about the environment, it's about long-term economic and energy security. History shows us that oil dependence leads to instability, while energy innovation leads to resilience and growth. The world is moving toward a future where green energy plays a leading role, and that's a direct result of the hard lessons learned from past oil shocks. If you enjoyed this deep dive into history, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Truth Behind History. We break down the most pivotal moments in history so you can see how the past still shapes our world today. And if you're interested in more economic and political history, check out our other videos on financial crashes, global conflicts, and historical turning points, because trust me, history is full of surprises. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.